Today we want to create some roots for our old gnarly tree. I used the one that we built during the tutorial series. You can see the hierarchy right here. I used a null object and inside the stem and the branch object of the old gnarly tree. This time we'll use Xfrog 4 to create the roots. So add a branch object to the scene. You can hide the circle, we don't need it because this is only the base for our roots. So I call it base roots. And then we should bring down the length of the path spline to about 600 units. Then add another branch object to the scene, rename it to roots. Activate the circle spline. Change the radius to about 80 units and change the angle to about 60 and then delete the spline. We'll use a curvature spline as path. With the curvature spline active, go for the translation Y settings, open up the details and activate the control points, reduce the values to about 600 units, and then you can drag the roots object onto the third position inside the base roots hierarchy. So here you can see this little extra tree. I think that the roots start growing in areas much too high. So I'll activate the base roots object and reduce the length down to about perhaps, let's try 200. Yes, I think this is okay, so 200 units. Then back to the base roots object. At first I'll adjust the thickness a little bit. Here you can play around and create different states of thickness of the child roots. Then go for the node properties. I reduce the number of roots to about 7. And then we can work on the node growth. I think they're too short. So I'm using higher values inside node growth. And of course now we have one problem. The roots emerge horizontally, but they should point downwards. So go for the node angle of the base roots object. Drag the control points upwards so that the roots start to grow downwards. Perhaps something like this. Now we already could apply a material with a displacement perhaps. You should remember the problem with displacement in thin areas. It's the same problem that like we had with branches. So Part1 material solved this problem. So we'll use a copy of this material. I'm just using Control C, Control V to copy this material, rename it to roots, and then drag it onto the roots object. Don't forget to go for the tag properties and enter -y. You have to do because by default all the textures are applied flipped down. I don't know exactly why this is, but I've heard from a developer that this has some technical reasons and especially works much better when doing growth animations. So the textures by default are flipped, and this you can change by using the -y value. Perhaps you also remember that we use pretty low values for the branch displacement. We'll use higher values for our roots. So I think perhaps 15 units should be okay. So now you could do a first test render if you want to, and take a look at the result that we get. So here we go. nice gnarly surface. But now, of course, we still have one problem. The roots are simply pointing downwards, which looks pretty lame. Please activate the curvature spline of the root object and go for the parameter rotation X. Here we'll have to enter this noise function. Perhaps something like this. We use similar formulas inside the branch curvature splines. And now, because of this multiplied by X, we can control the strength of the noise with the curvature spline right here. So simply drag the points upwards, the control points, and the roots start to twiddle around. Perhaps we can use higher values right here. Simply do some tests until you think you're satisfied with the look. And then we could copy. It's possible to copy the complete curve. So at first close the details, then right-click rotation X, choose copy, then go down to rotation Z and choose paste. And then you'll see you copied the formula and also the curve. And perhaps you want to use different values inside this one, perhaps some lower values. And I think now you have some nice gnarly roots. In this case, I'm already pretty happy with the result of the roots. But sometimes we have the problems that too much roots are pointing directly downwards or well, cross the tree underneath the tree. And there's a way to solve this problem. Perhaps you should use the tropism object to solve this problem. So add a tropism object to the scene. And then also add a null object and rename it to target. Then drag the tropism object into the curvature spline of the roots. Go for the properties, for the attributes of this tropism object. Change the type from axis to point. By default, now the world 0 is used. I'm using the target object as reference right now, so I could move this point, this reference point, and now simply change the strength. We want that the tropism pushes the roots from this target point away. So I'm using negative values, and you see how the roots start to grow away from this point. We shouldn't use too strong values, but you can see that this is a really helpful method if you want to push the roots outwards. So I think now we have a really nice result, gnarly roots with a gnarly surface, and it didn't take very long to get to this result. Next time I'll show you some other ways to create roots with Xfrog 4.